Not every tiny animatronic in Five Nights at Freddy's is trying to kill you. Some of them are just kind of there, existing, taking up space, but a few of them are genuinely terrifying. So today I'm ranking every small animatronic in FNAF from least to most threatening. Starting with the participation trophy of the bunch, Helpy Helpy is, for lack of a better term, a shrunken Freddy Fazbear clone, roughly the size of a large plush toy. And it is the biggest animatronic on this list, which should tell you something about how small things are about to get. Here's the thing about Helpy, it doesn't really do anything. In Ultimate Custom Night, Helpy pops up on your cameras like an uninvited guest at a party. It interrupts you, sure, but it has never been documented to independently cause a game over. It just shows up, exists for a moment, and leaves. That's the whole act. Lore-wise, Helpy is basically a ghost. Zero backstory, zero dialogue, no clear placement in the Fazbear timeline whatsoever. There's nothing connecting Helpy to any major event, any tragedy, any experiment. It's just a little bear that materializes out of thin air to mildly inconvenience you. Threat ranking, 10 out of 10. Dead last. The kind of animatronic that would lose a fight to a moderately aggressive house cat. But if Helpy is the comedy warm-up act, Bonnet is where things start getting a little more uncomfortable. Bonnet, most FNAF animatronics want to kill you from a door, a vent, or straight down a hallway. Bonnet wants to kill you by casually strolling across your office like she owns the place. And honestly, that's just rude. This little pink nightmare from Sister Location is basically a recolored Bon Bon, Funtime Freddy's bunny hand puppet, except Bonnet operates independently. She appears directly in your office and walks across the screen while giggling to herself. You spend the entire game developing habits around checking cameras, watching vents, scanning entry points. Bonnet punishes every single one of those habits by just showing up in front of you with zero warning, no camera feed, no audio cue, just a pink rabbit sliding through your workspace like it's a Sunday afternoon. Here's the thing, she's tiny, a small pink reskin of Bon Bon with that same rounded bunny look, which means she doesn't carry the visual weight of the bigger animatronics. She's giggling, she's pink, she's adorable, she will kill you. Mechanically, you have to click on her as she walks across the screen before she reaches the other side. Miss her, and that's it. No second chances. She's essentially Bon Bon's counterpart, which is a polite way of saying she's a support act that somehow ended up more annoying than the headliner. Bonnet earns a 9 out of 10 on the threat scale, not because she's weak, but because she's the blink and you miss it jump scare you forget about until she's already halfway across the screen, which is, you know, not ideal. But if Bonnet frustrates you, wait until you meet the animatronic she shares a name with, Bon Bon. Here's a fun design question for you. What happens when a warning system becomes the thing you need warning about? Bon Bon is a small bunny animatronic with blue coloring and red cheeks that rides around on Funtime Freddy's hand like a living accessory. When it's attached, Bon Bon actually helps you. You can use its position to track where Funtime Freddy is moving, which sounds generous until you realize the game is just setting you up. Because Bon Bon detaches, the second that happens, your one animatronic problem becomes a two animatronic problem. Bon Bon splits off and starts operating independently, forcing you to track two separate threats from what was originally a single encounter. Your mid-strategy, you've got a plan for dealing with Funtime Freddy, and suddenly you need a whole second plan because his hand puppet decided to go freelance. The design flip is genuinely elegant. Bon Bon serves as your tracking tool right up until the moment it becomes the thing you failed to track. It's a warning light that turns into a second fire. Then there's the lore question nobody has a clean answer for. Does Bon Bon actually think? Is there an independent consciousness in that tiny frame, or is it just a sophisticated puppet being remote piloted by Funtime Freddy? The game never commits either way, which is honestly more unsettling than a straight answer would be. A puppet that acts alive, and an alive thing that acts like a puppet look exactly the same from the outside. I don't know what to tell you. Ranking it 8 out of 10. Individually manageable, sure, but that detachment mechanic turns a routine encounter into genuine chaos. But if Bon Bon splitting off from Funtime Freddy sounds annoying, wait until you meet the tiny dancers that come with Ballora in bulk. The mini-arenas. Here's a fun principle that applies to basically everything from warfare to wildlife to haunted pizza restaurants. One small thing is a nuisance. A dozen small things moving in coordination is a nightmare. The mini-arenas understand this on a molecular level. These are Ballora's backup dancers, a collective of tiny humanoid animatronics standing roughly a meter tall, each one styled like a miniature ballerina. Pale skin, elongated limbs, ballet-inspired proportions. They look graceful. They look delicate. delicate. They look like the kind of thing you'd put on a music box, and then 5 of them show up at once, and you realize you're about to die in the most elegant way possible. No individual mini-arena is going to ruin your day. A single one is manageable. You deal with it, you move on. But the mini-arenas don't operate solo. They appear in multiples, sometimes in rapid sequence, and every single one demands your attention. Ignore even one and it cascades. They don't overpower you. They grind you down, death by 1,000 tiny ballet slippers. That's what makes them the first true swarm entry on this list, and it's worth paying attention to the model because it comes back. The attrition approach means your resources get stretched thinner and thinner until something slips through, and something always slips through. Lore-wise, they're positioned as auxiliary entertainment performers inside Circus Baby's facility, just dancers. But this is Sister Location we're talking about, a place where literally nothing is just what it appears to be. Whether these coordinated little performers carry something darker beneath the tutu is still up for debate. Ranked 7 out of 10. Not because any one of them is scary, because you never get just one, but if you think a swarm of tiny ballerinas sounds bad, wait until you meet their even smaller, angrier cousins, the Bitty Babs. Every animatronic we've talked about so far has been annoying, creepy, or unsettling in some way, but none of them have actively wanted to catch you. The Bitty Babs change that completely. These little nightmares stand roughly 0.75 to 1 meter tall, painted in deceptively cheerful colors that make them look like they belong in a daycare rather than an underground horror facility. They operate in pairs or small groups, and here's the thing, they don't wait for you to stumble into them. They come to you, aggressively, relentlessly, with what can only be described as enthusiasm. Unlike Bon Bon hitching a ride on someone else, or the mini-arenas swarming you through sheer numbers, the Bitty Babs engage in direct horizontal pursuit. They reposition constantly, cutting through alternative routes and approaching from vectors you didn't even know existed. Their small size isn't a limitation, it's a tactical advantage. They can squeeze through spaces that full-sized animatronics couldn't dream of fitting into, which means your usual close the door and pray strategy has some serious holes in it. Literally. But here's where it gets complicated. The coordination between them suggests something beyond basic programming. These aren't mindless little dolls bumping into walls. They flank, they reposition, they adapt. That's not the behavior of a simple entertainment robot. That's predator logic packed into a frame the size of a toddler. The lore community is split on what exactly the Bitty Babs were designed for. One camp says they're security units built specifically to chase down intruders in tight spaces. The other camp argues they started as entertainment animatronics that got corrupted by Sister Location's consciousness-infected infrastructure. Same as everything else down there. Either way, the result is the same. Small, fast, smart, and absolutely determined to ruin your evening. Ranked 6 out of 10, the Bitty Babs are the first entry on this list that genuinely hunts you. But if you think coordinated pursuit is scary, wait until you meet something that sits perfectly still in a chair and somehow manages to be worse. Plushtrap take one of the most iconic designs in the entire FNAF franchise, shrink him down to the size of a toddler, and wrap him in plush fabric. That's Plushtrap. Somehow he's arguably more annoying to deal with than anything full size. Plushtrap is a nightmarish plush version of Spring Bonnie, standing roughly 0.6 to 0.75 meters tall. That's about knee height on an average adult. He's got rows of tiny sharp teeth crammed into a grinning mouth, beady little eyes that follow you, and a torn up plush aesthetic that looks like something you'd win at a carnival and immediately regret bringing home. Here's the thing about Plushtrap though, his entire threat model is built around one mechanic: timing. Players have to predict exactly when he's going to move and where he's going to land, catching him in a specific position to neutralize the threat. Sounds simple enough, except Plushtrap doesn't play fair. His movement is deliberately erratic, designed specifically to defeat the pattern learning strategies that veteran players rely on. You think you figured out his cycle, you commit to a timing window, and he just decides to do something completely different. It's like playing chess against someone who occasionally flips the board for fun. Now the lore side is where things get genuinely interesting. Some fans argue he's a possessed merchandise toy, a plush version of Spring Bonnie that somehow got infected by whatever supernatural force animates the rest of things. Others think he's a nightmare manifestation of the crying child's real-life toy. And then there's the theory that Plushtrap carries some fragment of the dark energy tied to William Afton, a splinter of that legacy trapped in a plush prison roughly the size of a fire hydrant, which is, you know, not ideal. Ranked number 5 on this list, Plushtrap earns his spot through sheer unnerving energy alone. He didn't just inherit Spring Bonnie's name, he inherited the the attitude. But if you think a tiny nightmare plush is unsettling, wait until you see what happens when Balloon Boy gets the nightmare treatment, Nightmare BB. Here's a question that'll break your brain if you think about it too long. Can a nightmare kill you? In most franchises, the answer is obviously no. Dreams aren't real. Hallucinations can't hurt you. End of discussion. But this is Five Nights at Freddy's, a series where dead children possess robots, where consciousness gets transferred between mechanical bodies like swapping USB drive, where a man literally refuses to stay dead across multiple decades. So when FNAF 4's Halloween update presents you with Nightmare BB, a grotesque skeletal distortion of Balloon Boy lurking in the shadows of your childhood bed, the question of whether it's real suddenly gets harder to answer. Nightmare BB doesn't exist as a physical animatronic. There's no endoskeleton sitting in a warehouse somewhere. It's a nightmare manifestation born from psychological trauma, a version of Balloon Boy that got fed through a meat grinder of childhood fear and came out looking like something that crawls out of storm drains. The exaggerated skeletal structure, the pitch dark coloring, the hollow eyes. This is what happens when a kid's brain takes an already creepy animatronic and dials it up to 11. But here's where it gets complicated. The nightmare animatronics in FNAF 4 can kill you. They produce real consequences. Whether they exist in meat space or exclusively in the protagonist's fractured psyche, the result is identical. You die. Mechanically, Nightmare BB appears in the Fun with Balloon Boy minigame, replacing Plush Trap in the Hallway Challenge. Same concept, completely different energy, because where Plush Trap is unsettling in a weird toy come to life way, Nightmare BB looks like something a sleep paralysis demon would be afraid of. You flash your light, check if it's on the mark, and if you get the timing wrong, it's already too close. Simple, brutal. The Biddy Babs from the last section hunt you down through aggression and brute persistence. Nightmare BB doesn't need to chase you through a facility. It just sits in that hallway, daring you to check at the wrong moment. It doesn't need to compete for your attention. It has you all to itself, but if a single nightmare entity lurking in your hallway sounds bad, wait until you meet the ones that multiply on your bed while you're not looking. The Frettles. Take everything I just said about the mini-renas and throw it out the window. The Frettles are that concept on steroids. These tiny Freddy Fazbear clones stand roughly half a meter to 3/4 of a meter tall, and individually they're about as threatening as a moderately angry hamster. One Frettle shows up on your bed, you flick your flashlight, it scatters. Simple, manageable, almost cute in a please stop looking at me like that kind of way. But here's where the Frettles break the rules. The mini-renas have a ceiling. At some point you've dealt with enough of them and the pressure levels off. The Frettles don't do that. Every additional Frettle that shows up makes the situation measurably worse. With zero plateau, they scale infinitely. The more you ignore them, the more they multiply. And the more they multiply, the closer you get to a game over. That feels less like a jump scare and more like death by 1,000 tiny bear-shaped cuts. No individual Frettle is going to end your run. That's the trick. The threat isn't any single unit, it's the attrition. Your defensive systems will eventually fail against sufficient numbers, and the Frettles know it. They're not trying to kill you, they're trying to outlast you, which is, not ideal. But here's the thing that elevates the Frettles from a gameplay gimmick into something genuinely unsettling. A major community theory proposes that the Frettles aren't separate entities at all. They're fragments of Freddy Fazbear's consciousness distributed across multiple physical bodies. One mind, many shells. Every little bear staring at you from the foot of your bed is the same intelligence wearing a different face. That connects directly to the broader FNAF themes about soul fragmentation and remnant distribution. If this theory holds, the Frettles aren't a swarm. They're a shattered consciousness trying to reassemble itself one tiny body at a time. And every time you flash your light to scatter them, you're not solving the problem. You're just breaking the pieces apart again. Coming in at number 3, the Frettles earn their spot as the miniature army that overwhelms through sheer numbers and relentless coordination. But if you think a distributed consciousness is strange, wait until you see what's growing in the Plushkin patch. The Plushkin patch. Here's a question that should terrify you. What do you do when something doesn't fit into any category you understand? In FNAF, survival is about pattern recognition. You learn the rules. You learn which doors to close, which cameras to check, which sounds mean something is coming. Every animatronic operates within a system, and once you crack that system, you survive. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. The Plushkin patch breaks the deal. These are small, plush textured animatronics measuring roughly 0.3 to 0.6 meters tall, existing in this weird meta-narrative space that partially references external properties and partially lives within FNAF's expanded universe. They look like toys, they feel like Easter eggs, and that's exactly the problem, because the moment you dismiss them as harmless novelties, you've already made the mistake they're designed to exploit. Their primary threat mechanic isn't speed, or strength, or numbers, it's the violation of your expectations. Every defensive strategy you've built from years of FNAF experience becomes useless against something that exists outside standard animatronic classification. You can't predict what you can't categorize. You can't defend against what you don't understand, and the Plushkin patch understands that better than you do. The canonical status of these things is deliberately ambiguous, which, you know, is not reassuring. Interpretations range from possessed merchandise to consciousness transfer platforms to alternate continuity entities that shouldn't technically exist in the timeline at all. Some fans theorize they host consciousness fragments from destroyed animatronics, essentially functioning as vessels for souls that have nowhere else to go. Homeless ghosts checking into the plush hotel. Cool. Add that to the list. And that ambiguity isn't a flaw in the writing, it is the threat. In a franchise where understanding the rules is literally how you stay alive, an animatronic that refuses to be understood is the most dangerous thing imaginable. You can't build a strategy around a question mark. Ranked number 2 out of 10. The ones you underestimate because you cannot categorize them, and that is exactly why they're dangerous. But if you think unclassifiable is bad, wait until you meet the smallest animatronics in the entire franchise, because these things take everything we just talked about and somehow make it worse. The miniature music men. Every animatronic on this list has been small, some have been creepy, a few have been genuinely dangerous, but none of them compare to this. The miniature music men are among the smallest animatronics in the entire FNAF franchise. We're talking barely knee height, wind-up toy energy. You could punt one across a room, and it would kill you before your foot came back down. These things are built like tiny orchestral automatons, all ticking gears and music box internals, and they show up in Security Breach crawling through ventilation systems that literally no other animatronic in the game can access. Zero camera coverage, zero defensive options. You hear the music box winding up and you either sprint through those vents before they catch you or you don't make it out at all. Here's the thing, their attack mechanic isn't brute force, it's audio pressure. You hear them coming, that music box sound starts playing, and suddenly you're bolting through a cramped vent system knowing that these tiny nightmares are right behind you. There's no fighting back, there's no hiding. You just run and hope the exit is closer than they are. But here's where it gets really unsettling. These things exist inside the Mega Pizzaplex, the same sprawling complex where Vanny is carrying out Glitchtrap's plans, and where Fazbear Entertainment has buried decades of secrets beneath layers of corporate renovation, which raises a question the community still can't agree on. What exactly is animating these things? Are they remnant infused like so many other animatronics in the franchise, or are they purely mechanical drones following programmed patrol routes? Because both options are horrifying. One means there are potentially dozens of trapped souls small enough to crawl through your air ducts. The other means Fazbear Entertainment deliberately designed tiny killing machines and put them in a children's entertainment venue, which is, you know, not ideal. Either way, they represent some of the most unnerving miniaturization Fazbear Entertainment ever produced. Forget the massive glam rock animatronics stomping around the main floors. The real threat is something small enough to fit in a ventilation shaft and fast enough that you can't outrun it. Ranked number 1 out of 10, among the absolute smallest, deadliest pint-sized killers in the franchise. Proof that in the FNAF universe, the thing you cannot see is always the thing that kills you. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.